should be seeing a chart with Cancer Lagna, yes?
Yes.
So just out of curiosity, do any of those with in the India background, anyone recognize this name? No, okay.
No, I don't.
No. Yeah, so, well, before I start sharing who it is and why I'm discussing this chart, what would you identify as being very notable distinguishing features of this chart?
A combination of Mahaparushta yogas, many.
So there are no less than 3 Mahapurush yogas here, right?
Yep.
So we have Jupiter in its exaltation sign, not merely that, but Vargotama in the Lagna. And then in the 4th house, you have Venus giving Malavya Yoga as the 4th lord in the 4th house, and it's Mula Trikona sign. But then, of course, there's also Sasha Yoga that is brought about by Saturn being in its exaltation sign, also at an angle. And then what's going on with these 3 very well dignified planets that we'd also want to make note of?
Their angular relationship.
They're strong in Navamsha. Saturn is strong in Navamsha. Venus is Digbala. Jupiter is Digbala.
So,
Mark, they are mutual co-workers.
well, both responses are absolutely correct. Jupiter, obviously, because it's Vargotama, also has strength in Navamsha. Saturn goes to its own sign. And Venus, besides being in its own sign, gets directional sign. So these are exceptional qualified planets as far as their strength. And then I think both Randall and Sonali were making note of the fact that because they fall in angular relationships from each other and in angular houses, and they have these dignities, they qualify for this status as being mutual co-workers, the effect of which is that they can give Raja Yoga, therefore in its periods and sub-periods. Mutual co-workers is defined by when planets are in angles from each other, not necessarily in angles from the birth lagna, although in this case they are. And planets must be in a good dignity, like exalted Mula Trikona own sign. So this is what we have here. And this is a very notable feature of this horoscope. What else would people highlight?
It's an exchange between Jupiter and Moon.
Producing what kind of, well, what kind of exchange is this then?
1-9.
So this is a very favorable and very notable feature of this horoscope. There's an exchange between 1 and 9 involving Jupiter and the Moon. And then what additionally good thing, well, first of all, what about this moon? How would you evaluate this moon besides the result of the exchange?
It's almost full.
So it's quite full, right? It's just past fullness. And then what else good thing happens to it? What good thing happens to the moon here besides getting an exchange with Jupiter?
By Jupiter, benefic, very strong Jupiter, benefic planet.
And who else?
Mercury, aspect of Mercury. Strong Mercury.
Mercury's aspect. And why is this Mercury exceptionally strong?
The exact degree of exaltation, 15-degree Virgo.
So it's just past, just within a half a degree of its most extreme exaltation. So, you know, you have a extremely strong Jupiter connected to the Lagna Lord, and then you have an extremely strong Mercury connected to the Lagna Lord Moon. What could this incline a person towards? What could be something that they would be inclined towards?
Literature.
Say again?
Literature.
I'm sorry, I didn't quite hear that.
This is a writer.
Oh, it's a writer. Well, very good. So this Jupiter and this Mercury are 2 planets of authorship, but they're also 2 planets of what? What else are they 2 planets of?
Education.
Sorry?
Education.
Education, yes. They're the 2 planets of education. And then, when in the article on the PK, I was highlighting that, there are different things that you can predict based on using the PK beyond children. And therefore, what would be another thing that you could predict with the PK or evaluate with the PK related to what we just talked about?
Education.
Educational success, right? And so what should we note here about the condition of this person's PK? What's the condition of the person's PK?
Very strong.
Exalted.
Exalted, and then own sign in Navamsha, and then with another benefic, right?
An aspect by another benefit.
Right. So let me see if I can pull up another screen here. Tell me when you see a page from Wikipedia, yes?
Yeah.
So this is the chart of a man who was an Indian politician, was a member of the, if I'm saying this correctly, the Rajya Sabha, besides being a politician, holding political positions in the state from which he was from. But what he was really known for, and extraordinarily so, was how many educational degrees he obtained. And you can see that first paragraph there. He first got a degree, became a doctor, an MD, but I don't think that he really ever practiced. But then he got a Bachelor of Laws, a Master of Laws in International Law, an MBA, a Doctor of Business Management, Bachelor of Journalism, Doctor of Literature and Sanskrit, and I just could go on and on here. He had 10 master's degrees, and very often he was doing these with the first merit, and in some cases being the gold medalist, meaning he was the best person in his class. You can see the note here that it says from 1973 to 1990, he wrote 42 university examinations every summer and every winter. So I actually just came across this horoscope this last week, and I've never seen a person that was so, had obtained so many degrees and was so educated. And I was fascinated to see the factors in his horoscope that would relate to that, which of course is this Jupiter, this Mercury, and this PK Saturn. Now, if we look at, from the Vimshotri point of view, when these were all happening, it was happening primarily, well, in terms of the degrees anyway, they were the Mercury, Ketu, and Venus major periods where this was all happening. What relevant divisional chart would we also look at this in terms of that timing?
D24.
Of course, D24, the Siddhamsha, right? And then you can see, well, it was Mercury, Ketu, and Venus. So you can see here their placement and condition. Now, I'm not sure that the birth time is accurate enough to give a correct D24 logna. It may, but regardless, you see Mercury here with the exalted Jupiter. You see Venus would be very well placed here in Mercury's sign. Ketu, you have to mentally put over into Taurus, in which case it's giving the results of Venus. So this was rather extraordinary. Now, from a Jaimini point of view, looking at the Dasha sequence, what would be Dashas that would be particularly good for, again, giving him position, status, which he certainly had as a politician for a very long period of time, which Jara Dashas here, as you see the sequence, would you highlight that way?
Libra.
Sorry?
Libra.
Are you saying Libra?
Yeah.
Yeah, certainly Libra, but are there any prior to that?
Cancer, Pisces.
Well, Cancer would be way down the road, right? So did someone say Pisces?
I did.
Yeah, So why would you identify Pisces? Because this is the at the young age of 26 is when he first won his first political position in election. Why would you highlight that?
Because Pisces, moon being in Pisces, it's a GK, but it gets an aspect of Mercury AMK.
Well, it's the strong AMK aspecting the angles from there, right?
Yes.
Which would include Sagittarius, which would be the 10th from Pisces. But, you know, people may remember from my article in the GK where I talked about it when, you know, the GK is connected to the AMK. This can be good for winning competitions, right? Which is, of course, exactly what happened when you're running for an office. You're winning a competition, right? So that his first political office came then, but then see the sequence, which period after that might you also particularly highlight, or maybe a couple of them?
Aquarius,
Aquarius, why would you say Aquarius?
because it gets the aspect of the MK, the PK, and the DK.
True, and of course the strong natural benefic. What about Capricorn? Because you see from Capricorn, look what happens to the 10th house from there, right? And you know this general principle that you maybe all learned when you took my course on Gemini, that when the AMK falls 9th, 10th, or 11th, particularly in strength from any particular period, it typically can be very good generally and professionally. But of course, when he runs Capricorn, look what happens to the 10th house Libra. And another thing that I was highlighting in the article on the PK was the way in which, of course, the PK can form good Gemini Raja yogas. So when he runs Capricorn, you don't just have Venus as the 10th lord in the 10th from there, and Saturn as the Lagna lord in the 10th, but what else is going on? Saturn being, of course, the PK. What else is going on here?
It's the aspect of the AK sun in Leo.
Yeah.
Right. You've got the AK, PK, Raja Yoga, in which both planets are in strength. So Capricorn had to prove against, but then actually it was in the Sagittarius period that he got his highest political office, where he became a member of the Rajya Sabha. And again, in what way would that be predictable, that this Sagittarius period could give him even a higher political status?
Amartya Karaka in the 10th house. Strong, really strong.
Okay, and then, you know, it doesn't appear to be forming any Raja Yoga. And again, this applies to when he runs Pisces, but does the AMK form any Gemini Raja Yoga other than just being an extremely exalted AMK?
With Mars BK.
Well, that would not, as a Karaka, the BK, that would not form a Gemini Raja Yoga, but what
A
house?
planet being expected by many other planets, but then the sign becomes strong. Yeah.
Well, I think what Katrina is alluding to is that the moon, you would typically want to see 4 or more grahas influencing the moon to have that particular type of Raja Yoga. But what house does Mars rule in this birth chart?
5th and the 10th.
The 5th. Do people remember that, you know, the 5th Lord is also something that you're wanting to use when you're seeing Gemini Raja Yogas, right? So Mars as the 5th Lord and Mercury as the AMK are forming a Gemini Raja Yoga. Of course, when he ran Pisces, that would be influencing the 10th from their Sagittarius. That's when he got his first political position. But then when he runs Sagittarius, that's really being activated because now the Mercury falls 10th from there as the 10th Lord. So strong in its highest point of exaltation here. And then people should always remember that Sagittarius can be by itself just a period of rise and sometimes also fall. Faye and Rao used to always highlight that. But now, one of the really, well, not the only reason, there's many reasons I wanted to discuss this chart, but one of the reasons being is that, of course, he eventually does run his Libra period, right? And this started in 1995 at age 41. Now, of course, it activates Jaimini Raja Yogas because it's activating the PK, AK. But you'll notice that it also contains the MK, very strong in its own sign. But who's it with and what influence can that have, both maybe on a plus side and a not so plus side?
It's with, well, it's with the PK, Saturn's there, but it's also, they're in a planetary war, and it could be some problems for the mother.
So there is a planetary war here. And again, if you go by brightness, which I do, Venus would be the winner of the war, Saturn would be the loser. But the thing I'm highlighting is that, yes, you want to look at what Karakas these planets are, but you also just want to note that the MK here is under the strong influence of a natural malefic who also happens to have a bad lordship for this particular Lagna. It's the Marika 7th Lord, but really its most problematic quality is as an 8th Lord. And then come to the sub-period of Cancer. And then where do these planets fall from Cancer? Using Cancer as an Antardasha Lagna.
The 4th.
And what does Cancer contain that could have a negative aspect to it?
The DK, which is a Maraka, can act as a Maraka.
And is there any affliction to this Cancer and therefore also the DK that you might notice?
Malefic hemming.
There's some, I would say, mild malefic hemming, but malefic hemming nonetheless. What happened during this period and sub-period was a tragic auto accident. His car was struck by a truck and he died at, I think he was only like 49 years old. This happened in 2004, if memory serves.
Mark,
Yes?
there is an interesting anecdote with Mr. Jiska. He was actually diagnosed with malignancy, blood cancer, a couple of years earlier before he died. And cancer surgeons from the US had told that it is only 6 months to live when he was actually diagnosed. And he lived for at least 4 years after that, 3 to 4 years after that. And he had told them that, don't worry, I'm going to survive this period and I'm not going to die so soon.
I see. Well, thank you for that, additional commentary. I hadn't been aware of that. Now, you'll notice that in the Vimshotri Dasha, this actually happened in Venus. So again, it's activating this combination, in which case Venus is not just the MK, but of course it's also the 4th Lord with this affliction from Saturn as an 8th Lord. And then the sub-period was actually the sub-period of Mercury. And here also, again, I would like to make a point. Mercury appears to be without affliction, but what might you consider about that?
Malefics in Kendras to Mercury.
And see the degrees here. Mars in particular and Mercury are almost in the same exact degree. And of course, the Rahu Ketu axis is close in degrees too. So I believe this Mercury is getting the Kendra Sambandha affliction, or the influence, you might say, of both Rahu Ketu and Mars, which is why, as a sub-period, it could give this kind of result.
It is also getting aspect of the GK.
Yes, but we're talking about planetary periods here. He wasn't running the sign period of Virgo, so again, I don't typically mix systems like that. But Sandeep is the one who added this additional commentary, and I have him to thank for bringing my attention to this particular chart, which was really quite fascinating to see with respect to the educational achievement, which, I don't know that I've ever seen something like this before. Any questions about, excuse me, Any questions about this particular example before we go on?
Mark, do you call this a Gauri yoga?
Well, what would not, I mean, it's just a really beautiful exchange, right? Of course, Mercury, Jupiter would have some affliction from the aspect of Saturn, but what would make it, anybody answer this question, why does it not actually become a Gauri yoga?
Because moon is not smart exalted.
That's it. It's,
I'm just saying because the exchange, will that make it a Gauri yoga?
well, I would say I would make it a quasi Gauri yoga. I mean, it doesn't technically meet the definition of the moon being in an angle or trine and in its own or exaltation sign, right? But when I say it like a quasi yoga, I mean it meets the spirit of the yoga, right? The spirit of the yoga is that the moon is in an angle or a trine and in strength.
Yes.
And then gets the aspect of a strong Jupiter. So it does meet what I would say would be the spirit of or the intended underlying significance of that kind of combination. So in that sense, I would say quasi, yes.
Yeah.
Mark?
Yes, go ahead, Peter.
Speaking about all of his educational achievements, I think it's curious that the fifth house from the Lagna has this rather serious malefic hemming, I feel. And yet he had so many educational achievements, but if we look at the fifth from the moon, I think that probably explains it better, would you say?
I would say. Now, when you talk about the hemming of of course, it has Rahu and Mars on one side, but it has Saturn on the other. In my experience, that is broken by a benefic, particularly a strong benefic, that a malefic hemming is either doesn't apply or is not so severe. What I did find curious a bit is that the fifth lord itself goes to the sixth under the influence of the Rahu-Ketu axis, but again, it has this very, very close Kendra-Sambandha relationship to this extremely exalted Mercury. And again, you have to look at when exactly the education was happening, right? Although that Mars as the fifth lord does get activated when he runs Venus, why would I say that? How does, when he runs Venus, does it actually pick up, some involvement of the fifth lord? Mars. Whose nakshatra is Venus in?
Rahu's nakshatra. Pati.
Rahu's nakshatra, right? Which of course, Rahu's with Mars. So that's what I'm alluding to then.
Also, Mark, it should be noted that the fifth house does get aspect from the strong Jupiter in the Lagna.
Absolutely. It's just, I was just struck by, given what we know about this man and his pursuit of education, just the strength of Jupiter, the strength of Mercury, the strength of the PK Saturn. And of course, one of the ways we also evaluate this is to see the fifth house, fifth lord from Mercury, which of course then becomes Capricorn, and we're back into this, extremely strong Saturn, which would be the fifth lord from there. And again, I want to emphasize that these two planets, Venus and Saturn, being closely, Kendra-Sambandha from Jupiter, you have that mutual co-working relationship going on. And especially when he runs Venus, what kind of results then that can bring out. These are good. These are all great observations and comments. Anything else before we move on?
Mark, do you know if this person was rich? Because he has this Lakshmi yoga for wealth, like the ninth lord, to be exalted, and in Kendra or trine, Jupiter in this case, and Venus also, plus Venus. So this Lakshmi yoga, maybe any other
there's a form of Lakshmi yoga here, right?
Yeah.
It's not the kind of Lakshmi yoga that's in the chart of Bill Gatesman. And I don't know, Sandeep, can you add any perspective on that? I think I read that he was from a wealthy family, wasn't he? He came from a wealthy.
Yes. He was from a wealthy family, and then he also accumulated a lot of wealth. He actually runs a good school now, and he used to run a school here, and his family is still running that school. Incidentally, my daughter goes to the same school.
So Sandeep, who you're hearing from here, is from Nagpur, and this man was also from Nagpur, as you can see. Well, that's kind of an interesting anecdote. So this answers your question, Ekaterina, and good for you for seeing that,
Yeah, okay.
right? And some of this could have been inherited wealth, right? Why would I say that, particularly in the Venus major period?
Well, it's in the
It's
fourth
with
house.
Saturn, the eighth word, yeah.
Venus is the eighth lord Saturn, yes.
From the moon, Venus is the eighth lord in the eighth house with an exalted Saturn, who's the 11th lord from there.
I see.
Right. God, I love discussing charts with you people. You're also advanced students. Okay, anything else before we go on here? So I need to get rid of the name here. Hold on. So in the article on the PK, I was also making note of the fact that since it carries all the significations of the fifth house, one of which is mantra, then it could also be used to predict at a time when a person is very involved in chanting and the use of mantra. So when I pull up this chart here, focus on what has been the current Mahadasha in Charadasha, you'll see that it's been Pisces. Let me find the chart here. So you can see if you look down at the Charadasha, this person since 2015 started the Pisces period, which was how long here? 9 years, right? And so it's been a good long period. And what's in terms of what I just talked about or mentioned, what would you make note of with regards to Pisces and some experiences it might give?
It's the fifth house, Pisces is fifth house from the Lagna.
It's the fifth house
To
from the
start with that.
Lagna, and
Moon.
hold on, it's also the fifth house from the moon, but again, we're doing, yeah, it's also the fifth house from the moon, although we're doing Gemini here.
Okay, Pisces. Mhm.
And
So
then
it has the aspect of Jupiter,
has
and Ketu is there.
the aspect of its own lord, and then who is there?
Ketu is there, the Moksha Karaka. Yeah,
Ketu, the Moksha Karaka, in the Moksha sign, Pisces.
yeah.
So, of course, you know, the fifth house rules spiritual practices in general, but you know, the spiritual practice involving the use of mantra in particular. But then use Pisces as a lagna and see the fifth house from there.
PKAMK, Rajan.
Well, it has the PK from there again, which is like unto all the significations of the fifth house, and therefore it involves mantra. And then how many planets influence Cancer besides the two that are there?
3.
3?
5.
5 in
Three,
total.
three.
Three
Totally, yeah.
three in addition to the two that are there, right? Because you get Cancer is a movable Rashi, and so you get the aspect of the two planets in Taurus, and then the moon from Scorpio, and the moon would actually be the aspecting onto its own fifth house from there. And you know, what would you say about this moon here? What's kind of special or unique about it in certain ways as the ninth lord?
Vargotama moon.
It's a
It is-
Vargotama. It's a Vargotama. Well, first of all, we'd want to see, of course, it's in its debilitation sign, but what would you additionally say about that?
Nicha Bhanga,
Why Nichabanga, Nilama?
because it's dispositor aspects it.
And any other reason?
And moon is exalted in Venus, and Venus aspects it as well.
So it gets the aspect of its exaltation lord, right?
Lord, yes.
Plus it's Vargotama, plus it's a
It's
bright
in-
waxing moon,
And it's in the Kendra as well.
and it's in a Kendra. But what I'm highlighting is that, so she runs Pisces, the fifth house of her horoscope, Pisces being a moksha sign, Ketu being a moksha karaka, and both of these getting the aspect of Jupiter, who's the fifth lord itself. And then from there, you've got, from the fifth house, from there becomes so energized, also containing the PK, right? During this period, this person who's a Russian student of mine has done just an enormous amount of chanting of Vedic stotras, which of course embedded which are mantras. We're talking about things like Sri Rudram, Vishnu Sahasranam, Lalita Sahasranam, Devi Matmaya, and many, many more. She would spend at least a few hours a day, every day, chanting, usually as a part of a group, an online group. And then on the weekends, sometimes the majority, both Saturday and Sunday. So just a tremendous amount of involvement in chanting Sanskrit, stotras, embedded to which, as I said, are mantras. And you know, just taking a little deviation here, what, and maybe some of you have seen me talk about this horoscope before, but what Graha yogas, Parashari Graha yogas are present here that really can incline a person towards spiritual life and spiritual pursuits, spiritual sadhanas.
Shrikanta yoga.
So define what's Shrikanta yoga and how does it appear here, Ekaterina?
Shrikanta is when moon, sun, and the first word, in this case Mars, are in Kendras or in Trikonas, and have some strength, of course, but yeah.
No, this
moon,
is exactly
sun,
right.
yeah.
So sun, moon, and the Lagna Lord must be both all in angles and trines. And I would highlight here that what's particularly good about this Shrikanta yoga is that the sun is in the 9th house and the moon is the 9th Lord, right?
Yeah.
It's not an exceptional Shrikanta yoga here. Only the moon, I think, would be considered to have a particular source of strength. But is there any other yoga here that would also?
Srinath Yoga.
Srinath yoga.
Srinath Yoga.
So Sandeep, why don't you talk about the Srinatha yoga here?
It is the Venus, Mercury, and the 9th Lord. They have to be angles and trines.
So in this
Venus,
case,
Mercury, and Moon.
There is strength with two of these, of course, Venus being in its own sign, and we've talked about the moon. And it was exactly in her Venus major period that she really got involved in the spiritual pathway, particularly the spiritual pathway or the spiritual tradition of ancient India, the Sanatana Dharma. And a guru came into her life, and this is where she got on this pathway of doing, learning Sanskrit and doing so much chanting. And that really reached kind of a peak, as one might expect, in the Venus-Mercury period and subperiod, which is, of course, the two of the components of the Srinatha Yoga. And I like to use this chart and other charts like this to make the point that if you don't really see that these planets form these yogas, or this particular yoga, you would just miss entirely what was a major theme and a major focus of activity during this time. But then, of course, after activating the Srinatha yoga in Venus, then she runs currently the sun period, which is activating the Shrikanta yoga. And this has continued, but what I want to highlight also, notice that consecutively, starting last May, she would have run Sun, Moon, Sun, Mars. In Sun, Moon, she for the first time in years because of COVID, she was able to go to India, spend time in the ashram of her guru, engaged in daily sadhana, all this sort of thing. And then most recently, this last February in Sun, Mars, she and I actually met in Tirupati and together visited the famous Venkateshwara temple up in the mountain of just up beyond Tirupati. which was quite a remarkable experience, but also spending a lot of time in a Shiva temple. Remember, this was the Shiva variety of yoga, spending a lot of time in the Shiva temple that was in Tirupati itself. This was, again, being activated by her Sri Kanta yoga. And if you don't see this yoga, again, you don't see the potentials of this period, which was of great significance. So this is an example of how the PK potentially could have been noted. But you know, looking at this chart another way, she's not had children. What would be sort of the indication of this, both from the Jaimini point of view and the Prashya point of view and the Jaimini point of view?
Parashari point of view, Ketu is present in the 5th house.
And well, that's by itself is not that big of an issue, but
No.
what happens to the 5th Lord?
And I was just coming to that. And 5th Lord is in Papa Sankhya Yoga. Papa
Well,
Kartari.
Which house does it fall in?
It falls in 8th house, Papa Kartari Yoga.
So again, it's not a pure Papa Kartari. I would say
No.
the biggest issue here is the fact that there's some.
It's from the moon, yeah.
Yeah, well, it's Jupiter is just placed, the 5th Lord and the 8th can be a combination for, no children. I've seen it over and over again. And Jupiter's not just the 5th Lord, it's also Karaka Jupiter, right? But then, see the influences on the PK sun with Saturn aspected by Mars. Now it does get some benefic influence as well, but the influence of Saturn on the PK from the Jaimini point of view is one of the indications here that there hasn't been childbirth, and likely won't be at this point, given the fact that she's in her mid-40s. So you can look at these combinations in different ways, some on a positive side, some on a not so positive side. Any additional thoughts or questions about this chart before we move on?
Mark,
Sorry?
is there Parvata Yoga? Is a Parvata Yoga?
Well, the Parvata Yoga is defined how?
The Lagnesha is in a Kendra or Trikona with a Swa or an exalted planet. The dispositor of the Lagnesha. The dispositor of the Lagnesha
Right.
is Mars.
So Parvata Yoga, or the mountain yoga, is a dispositor yoga, and you're correct in identifying it here in the sense that the Lagna Lord Mars, its dispositor is Venus, and the dispositor, to meet the definition of this yoga, must be an angle and a trine and owner exaltation sign, which is the case here. So yes, there is Parvata Yoga, and since we're just talking about this chart, what other yoga is present here?
I see Amala Yoga as well.
There's Amala Yoga, it repeats from the moon. This person does have an artistic side. They play the violin. So yes, there's Malavya Yoga here. Anything else?
She has a Pravraja yoga in Navamsha. This spiritual thing, moon is in the sign of Mars, Scorpio, and is aspected by Saturn. This
very
is
good. Very good.
This adds to all these other yogas in Rashi, yes. This
Right.
always truly too, yeah.
No, I'm really glad you saw this and brought this up without my having to raise the question, because these yogas in Paladipika, Srikanta, Srinata, Varanshi, they won't always, when activated in the Dasha sequence, they don't always incline a person towards spiritual life and spirituality. They will, in my experience, do so when there are other things in the birth chart that really support and show this inclination as well. And in this case, the Pravraj Yoga in the Navamsha, where the moon is in the sign of Mars, aspected by Saturn. And of course, this is a rather strong Pravraj Yoga, given the moon's Vargotama status and Saturn, of course, being quite strong. Now, this person is not an official sannyasin in that sense. She hasn't become a monastic. She hasn't been taken vows or is involved in some renunciate order, but might say in a lot of ways lives the life of a spiritual renunciate, and certainly she admires such individuals. They become something of of an ideal for her. And, you know, when she runs the moon period, which of course would be not too far down the road, this is going to become quite active. You know, at times on a yearly basis, she spends time essentially living the life of a spiritual renunciate in an ashram and so on. And I'll be curious to see whether these tendencies become more pronounced when she moves into the moon period. So thank you, Ekaterina, for highlighting this. Anything else?
Chamara Yoga, both Brihat Parashara and Paladipaka.
Good for you. And so for the benefit of others, could you define that yoga?
It's the Bhava Yoga, Chamara Yoga is the Lagna Lord in a positive house with a benefic and preferably not a malefic aspect. So that's, you know, very true in
Right.
this case.
Right. So the Mars Venus are producing both that Chamara Yoga, but also the Parvati Yoga, right?
That's, and then there is a Chamara Yoga, the Brihat Parashara one, where you have a benefic in 1, 7, 9, 10, and there is a benefic in 7 and 10, and the Lagna Lord is strong.
So you're hearing some Nilama's encyclopedic memory of yogas, which is really good.
Mark,
All right.
just
Anything else?
one more thing. Since we started with those yogas, we almost never mentioned the other dispositor yogas like Parijata yoga in this case.
Well, Georgie, go ahead.
Oh, so basically it's when the dispositor of the Lagna Lord is in Kendra Trikona, and the dispositor of that one in Navamsha. The Navamsha dispositor is also in Kendra Trikona or a strong and in strong sign. So that's how it is basically.
Right. And so so very good that you would recognize this more complex and less known yoga. So in the interest of time, folks, and other charts that I want to talk about, I'm going to move on here and pull up a chart of someone who's about to graduate from high school. I've had their chart from birth. I've made predictions based on the chart. It has some rather unique features, and I actually have it wrongly in the wrong database, and I've put them in the database of movie stars, which is not, but that's where I'm going to have to get it from. So what would you see as being exceptional about this chart in terms of yogas, or any other thing that might come to your mind about this?
Is that Parashari or Gemini?
Well, from a Parashari point of view first.
Is there a Hansa yoga, the 12th lord in the 6th house, with the malefic influence of Mars?
Which yoga are you referring to?
I'm probably.
You're talking
it's
like a Vimala yoga, you mean?
Vimala yoga, yes. 12th lord in the 6th house.
Well,
6th or 8th
it's,
house.
you know, it's interesting you should bring that up, because as you can see, this person from a very young age has, actually they were born in Ketu, which gives the results of Venus, but then at age 6, they are running Venus, which is the current Mahadasha. And so the question is, does Venus here, being the 12th lord in the 6th with additional malefic influence, does it give a Viparit Raja Yoga, referred to as Vimala Yoga in Paladipika? Maybe, but does Venus here form any standard type of Raja Yoga?
Venus, Mercury, and the 4th and 5th.
Right. So
First,
you
4th, and 5th.
you can see here that Venus here is the 5th lord of education. And it is actually with Mercury, the Lagna Lord, forming a 1-5 Raja Yoga. Now it's in the 6th house with the 6th lord. And who's the PK here?
Mars.
PK is this Mars that's in its own sign. Now you'll note that in the Vamsh it goes to its debilitation by, but it's quite Nichabanga. And so what about, well, I want people to focus on the Navamsha. That's one of the things that's unusual and exceptional about this horoscope. You'll note that almost every graha has some special dignity. The moon is, which is a bright waxing moon, is Vargotama. Rahu, if you take Taurus as its exaltation sign, which I do, it's exalted. Saturn is Vargotama. Mars is quite Nichabanga. Jupiter is in its exaltation sign. Venus is in its own sign. And Mercury is Vargotama. Every planet but the sun has some source of strength in Navamsha. This really, really boosts up the quality of a horoscope. But, you know, in terms of yogas based on house lordship, of course, we just made note of the Venus-Mercury 1-5 combination. But yogas based on house lordship, what also is very prominent in this chart? Based on house, not graha yogas, but yogas based on house lordship.
Dhan Yoga.
Dhan yogas, right? Dhan yogas. Go ahead. I enumerate these. Go ahead.
The first Lord, the fifth Lord, and the 11th Lord are together.
So you have a combination of 1, 5, and 11. Now they're in the 6th house, but of course Mars is also this 11th Lord. And then what other Dhan yogas exist here? Anyone?
Saturn as the 9th Lord in the 2nd house.
Vargotama. Keep going.
Vargotama.
Keep going. Keep going.
Moon, 2nd Lord in the 11th house.
Vargotama.
And Vargotama.
Now, many of you have heard me talk about that when you see a planet giving a certain kind of yoga, and then its sign lord also gives a similar yoga, then this adds to that yogic giving quality of it. So in the case of this Saturn as a 9th lord in the 2nd, its dispositor is the moon, who's a Vargotama 2nd lord in the 11th. And then who's the moon's dispositor? It's this Mars, who's with the combination of the 5th lord Venus and the 1st lord Mercury. So actually every one of these planets, all of them in strength, are dispositing each other. So this person was born, is born in Ketu, given the results of Venus, in a very affluent circumstances, as you can expect. But in Venus, he's also, for especially being quite a young person, has earned extremely well, sometimes thousands of dollars per project, because he's developed, well, besides being an extremely accomplished both classical and jazz musician, and is oftentimes paid handsomely to perform in such a way, he's also developed extremely good computer skills and skills as a videographer. And even as a high school student, he's been hired to, you know, do projects this way that have paid him in the thousands. So he's actually earned extremely well at such a young age, given the Dhan yogas here. Now, this combination of this Raja yoga in the 6th with the 6th, what could it be good for? What could,
Competition.
yes, it could be good for being successful and triumphant in competitions. And when he started being, you know, something of a musical prodigy, both his parents are classical musicians. When he himself started becoming something of a musical prodigy, I told his mother that, you know, he should enter competitions and that he would likely to be quite successful with them, which turned out to be the case. One of which, when he graduated from elementary school, he wanted to go to a really renowned private high school in the area that had a very good music department. And every year, the department for incoming students held a competition. And if the winner of the competition would get full tuition to the school, which was like worth $30,000 a year, something like that. He won that competition and got that scholarship in Venus Rahu. Look at how that activates. Look how Venus Rahu activates the Raja Yoga plus Dana Yoga plus the 6th house of competitions. and I had predicted it on that basis. The reason I had this chart in mind is that he's at the point now where he's going to be graduating from high school soon and was applying to colleges. He could get into any college that he applied for, but his number one school on his list was a school called Carnegie Mellon, a private university in Pittsburgh, because they have a renowned robotics and computer science department, which is an area that he's interested in. And again, I predicted, it's hard to get into, particularly that program. And I predicted to his mother that he would in fact get accepted, and he has, and got a full scholarship. This has happened in the Venus-Jupiter period and sub-period. And I want to use it to make a point here. D24 is a divisional chart, a rather fine divisional chart. And because it's a rather fine divisional chart, I've found it very useful in sometimes, doing minute rectifications of a birth time. Now, if you look at Venus-Jupiter in his D24 using this particular birth time, you'll see Venus would go to the 6th, not particularly well placed. It would get this aspect of Jupiter. Jupiter would be falling in the 2nd there. But if you look at the degree of the Lagna, 359, and you were familiar with a dividing line between a Sadamsha, which would be, I believe, 345, you would see that it's just 15 minutes or so beyond that. And if you back it up, which would be just a minute or so to the birth time, it would then give a Sagittarius Lagna, in which case Venus would go to the 5th, Jupiter would be the Lagna Lord in the Lagna, aspecting that Venus. And, it's always a judgment, but it appeals to me. And I suspect that his true D24 Lagna is Sagittarius, not Scorpio, right? But the reason I wanted to highlight this is because strong 5th Lord of education, but also strong PK. If you look at Charadashas, when he's been in the most recent one here, when he runs Pisces, what happens to the 5th house from there?
It's the aspect of its own lord, which is the AK, and the sun, which is,
well, gets the influence of a lot of different grahas, right? And that form Jaimini Raja Yogas, but in particular, Mars is aspecting on there as the PK. And so I have no doubt that he'll continue to just do excellent academically. And, college is typically sort of a 4-year affair here that he's going to start this fall. So he would potentially graduate during this period. Pisces gets the aspect of this Jupiter as well. So this is one thing that I wanted to share with you relative again to using the PK, or how the PK can be used to predict educational success. Any additional comments about this before I move on? No, Georgie, you had sent me that one email. Do you mind if I use your chart and talk about it?
No, no problem.
So this is the wrong database. No wonder I can't find it. So Georgie, by the way, has just really been a very superb student of Jyotish and predicts very well, very advanced student. And you can see that in Vimshotri, as of November of 2021, he moved into Saturn and Venus. But now in Chara, he's been in Scorpio since just this last December. And, what would you maybe predict career-wise with regards to Scorpio, and why? Why could he do very well professionally during this period? according to the Jaimini system.
Matya Karaka goes to the 10th. Yeah.
Say, go ahead, Ekaterina.
From Scorpio, Amatya Karaka goes to 10th house.
And then what
Saturn.
else is going on here that would augment that prediction, or that inclination? What else is going on with Saturn as the AMK?
Is
The
it-
aspect of the-
involved with Venus, Putra Karaka in Raj Yoga. Yes.
Right. So it gets the aspect of Venus as a strong natural benefic in its Mula Trikona sign, but also as the PK. So this forms a Jaimini Raja Yoga, right? So this shows some good potentials in terms of professional success. But when you look at just the influences on Scorpio itself, of course, the Mercury is there as the AK, Sun's there as the BK. But then whose influence do they also get?
Jupiter as an MK.
They get Jupiter's influence as not just the MK, but as an exalted MK, right?
Yes.
So one of the things that I was bringing out in the article and demonstrating how I've in times predicted on this basis, that when, of course, when you run the Chara Dasha of some sign and it gets the influence of some Karaka, then it can bring events related to that Karaka, particularly if that Karaka is in strength. And so Georgie wrote me an email and you know, was speculating about whether, you know, this period might bring property or a vehicle. He shared that, you know, because he's moved around a lot, he's not really, he's been more of a renter, he's not really owned his own, you know, property. But, you know, at times he has had a good sports car, he mentioned, when he was living in the US for a period of time. If this were to come about in this period, what sub-period might you highlight in particular that could be good for this? Both the potential for vehicle purchase or property purchase. What upcoming sub-period in Scorpio might you highlight and why?
Cancer, it contains MK.
But so of course, Cancer as a sub-period becomes obvious because it contains this exalted natural benefic who happens to be the MK. But then why in particular Cancer? Is there any other reason why Cancer as a sub-period might be notable in this way?
Cancer is the natural fourth lord of the Kala Purusha.
Well, that's an interesting idea. Maybe I hadn't thought about that. I'm thinking of something else. What happens to the fourth house from Cancer?
Yeah. Contains one sign Venus.
Fourth house becomes very strong there with Venus as also the natural significator of vehicles, as the fourth lord and the fourth from there. Now, it does get some malefic influence, but what else is going on there that I highlighted in that article as being a combination given in the Jaimini Sutras for also giving a person good vehicles?
Moon Venus combination.
There's the Moon-Venus combination. The moon there from Aquarius is in a mutual Rashi Drishti with Venus. So you have that Raja Yoga, but it can be a combination again for having good vehicles. So I guess my question, you know, George, is that everything starts with an intention, right? I mean, do you have any intention or even the thought of wanting to purchase property or a vehicle?
I don't know.
Right.
I just saw it, and the reason actually I'm very good at speculating and connecting the dots. So basically, what I saw was that okay, Scorpio overlaps with Saturn Venus, so some kind of a professional rise. But then I also saw that this could come with some kind of a relocation somewhere else. And I was thinking, okay, if there's relocation somewhere else, maybe I'll need a car or maybe, you know, a property or something like that.
Right. So sometimes, you know, things just happen that then, you know, things unfold this way, right? So you've been running this Saturn major period and, you know, it could bring a relocation, right? Could bring a move. given what you see here, right? But in other words, but you don't have any, right now, you don't have any thought of, oh, I want to buy some property, I want to buy a new vehicle, correct?
As of today, no.
Yeah, right. So that's what I wondered about. Okay, so
Can I please make a comment, Mark, here?
you can, and then I have, go ahead.
Mark, like Scorpio is the Karkamsha Lagna here, and like Saturn falls 10th from Karkamsha Lagna. We were earlier discussing about potentials of Scorpio period, so it's a
Beautiful.
good period professionally.
Beautiful. So Dhruv is remembering that Jaimini Sutra from the chapter on the planets, the effects of planets from Karakamsha Lagna, where it says if Saturn falls 10th from the Karakamsha Lagna, then a person is successful in their line. And so the fact that it's both Saturn falling in the 10th house from Karakamsha Lagna when you run Scorpio, but also the AMK involved in this Jaimini Raja Yoga. But then from a Parashari point of view, what do you see on the screen there that could suggest confluence in the Parashari system that says that this period, Saturn-Venus, could also be good professionally?
Yes, Mark. There are two planets together in Lagna of D10.
With Saturn as the Lagna Lord in the Lagna, if this Dashamsha is correct, and then Venus would also be a good Yoga Karaka planet for the Dashamsha. So the D10 certainly brings that suggestion, right?
Aspected by Jupiter.
Getting the additional aspect of Jupiter, all the better.
And Venus being the fourth lord may also involve property with business as well.
Could be. So I would ask you, Giorgione, obviously this is a long period, takes you up till January 2025. Coincidentally, that's just about exactly when, or a little bit later, when Scorpio. How has this period been professionally for you? Can we ask?
Oh, so far, I would say so far has been very, very difficult actually.
Very difficult.
Yeah, and I can attribute this to the fact that up until January, that's my explanation. Up until January, I was in a very difficult, obviously, combination of first part of Sadhisati, Saturn in transit in the 8th house. It was the 22nd Drekana, so it was overlapping a lot of negative transits. That's my explanation.
Yeah. And of course, the period's not over yet, but I hear you that influence of Saturn during the Sadhisat here, particularly since there's a Moon Saturn aspect at birth, right? That can be challenging. Thanks for sharing. Okay, now I want to look at something here. I was sent this case by a student of mine who was asking about it, a question about it, and I'll describe what I mean by that after I pull up the chart here. And I want to discuss it because to make a point here about what certain sign periods can give in Chara Dasha and why. Wait a second. Where is this chart? Not seeing it like I should. Yeah, there it is. So you can see that this is a chart of a young Indian girl, right? So, she's in her early 20s, living in India, Indian girl, young woman. And she's been running Rahu Venus and was running at one point here recently, very recently. Actually, she's still in Rahu Venus Mercury. And this has coincided with Gemini, Pisces in the Charadasha system. Focus first on Parashari. What could be the danger of this period and why? I'm going to alert you to the fact that we're talking about not a good event at all. what could be the danger of this period and why?
Rahu, from Rahu Mahadasha, the Venus and Mercury are in the 8th. So 6-8 relationship because between Mahadasha world and Antardasha.
Well, you've zeroed in on it, Ekaterina. From Rahu, Venus goes to the 8th as what lord from there? Using Rahu as a Dasha Lagna, which houses does Venus rule?
Venus, Maraka, 2 Maraka houses, 2nd and 7th. From Rahu, 4th, the vehicles.
Fourth lord becomes the 4th lord of vehicles in the 8th house from there, right?
Yes.
Would you consider, well, I would consider malefic hemming here, although not extreme, because of the sun on one side, Ketu on the other, and the moon, a very dark moon here, not counting as a benefic, more as a malefic here. So I'd say there's at least some mild hemming of Aquarius and the 2 planets in there. But then, just look at which house is Cancer in, and, look at the afflictions here to the 4th house of the birth chart in general, because it's got Rahu. The moon is actually the 4th lord, therefore under the influence of Rahu Ketu axis. Mars, as a 1st but also an 8th lord, aspects Cancer and Rahu, and Saturn aspects the moon, the 4th lord. Does everyone see how much affliction is happening to the 4th house, 4th lord from the birth lagna? And they've been running this Rahu major period. And then Rahu, Venus, Mercury. So what happened was a rather terrible car accident that caused pretty severe injuries to this person. They were actually in a coma for 3 days. They apparently did come out of it, and they are going to survive and apparently be okay, but quite a traumatic incident. Now, my student, who is a very advanced student of Jyotish, could see this from the Parashari point of view. What they were asking me about is how Gemini Pisces gives such a result. And here's why I wanted to discuss this place in order to make a point. And some of you maybe have heard me talk about this. When I was first coming to understand how events come out in the Gemini system, one thing that I was coming across is that when a person ran the sign ruled by a particular Karaka, not where a particular Karaka fell, but a sign that where it was ruled by a particular Karaka. What I was seeing is that events related to that Karaka could get activated, such that, say, when you're running the sign that's ruled by the DK, I was seeing that people were marrying during this time. When they were running a sign ruled by the PK, I was seeing them having a child at this time. And lately, what I've been focusing on this, which sign, Gemini is ruled by which Karaka?
The MK.
The MK. Now consider this MK from a Gemini point of view. Does it have any severe affliction?
Yes. It's afflicted by the DK Mars and the GK Jupiter.
And Saturn.
Saturn.
And which planet is Mercury from the birth log? 3rd and 6th lord. So what I'm saying is that this is a really very, very afflicted MK. I'm sorry, I did that wrong. I did that wrong. So, Mercury itself is the 3rd and 6th lord, right? But what I'm saying is that this Mercury is a very afflicted MK, and this would be my explanation and understanding as to why the Gemini period could give such a result. And then from Pisces, where does the MK fall?
In the 12th.
In the 12th, with these afflictions. It's the afflictions that, so the point I'm making is that we see the potential for vehicular accident from the Parashari point of view just by seeing the condition and afflictions to the 4th house, 4th lord. Now, the Gemini equivalent of that, of course, would be the MK. and seeing its conditions being having the affliction of Saturn, Mars, and the GK Jupiter, and how that then gets activated when she runs the Gemini major period. Is it clear? Questions about that?
Well, Mark, also Gemini Pisces, and Pisces is ruled by Jupiter, who is the GK here, afflicted by Mars and Saturn.
Wonderful. Wonderful. So this is exactly what I'm getting at. And in keeping with this, let me pull up this chart that I came across in India that relates to your point. Look at the Jupiter-Mars period here, folks. Like in the chart we just saw, there's quite an affliction to the fourth house. Has Rahu, just like before. Has the aspect of Mars, just like before. Only in this case, Mars is also is again the eighth lord, but a worse eighth lord here because it also rules another tricidai. And if you take Saturn being retrograde as influencing from the sign previously, then you have all malefic influence on the fourth house and involving both the sixth lord Saturn and the eighth lord Mars. And then Karaka Jupiter, I'm sorry, then the Lord Jupiter is going to the 12th. And what's not good about this Jupiter, and what conditions are it's in that would be considered unfavorable?
Combustion and planetary war.
It's the loser in a planetary ward of Venus. What else?
Combustion.
All these planets,
Combust.
all these benefics, I mean, besides being in the 12th house with the 12th Lord, it's getting defeated in a planetary war, Jupiter is, and it's also combust. In fact, all these benefics, two of which are retrograde, are suffering from some level of combustion. Come now to the Jupiter-Mars period. See the potential here for, again, injury due to vehicular accident. He was on a motorcycle, he got involved in a bad accident. In this case, there was some permanent injury. He lost the use of his left arm, didn't lose the arm, but there's paralysis and he lost the use of it. But the reason I wanted to discuss this case is because from the Gemini point of view, this happened in the major period of Scorpio, which, Scorpio gets the aspect of the natural malefic Saturn as the BK, okay, but that alone would not account for such an occurrence in the Scorpio period. What planet rules Scorpio and which Karaka is it?
Mars is the GK.
As the GK in the Lagna, afflicting the Lagna and also afflicting the fourth house from there. And it was in Scorpio Sagittarius, this very afflicted fourth house, that he suffered, very life-altering injuries due to a vehicular accident. So my point is, again, is that when you're interpreting Chara Dasha in any sign period, you want to see not just who's in the sign or who's aspecting the sign. You want to see who the Lord is and which Karaka that Lord is, and because it's going to activate that Karaka. Is that clear? Is there any question about that?
Only perhaps, Mark, that the DK is involved in situations like this. Could we differentiate between the two significations of the DK, either marriage or possible Maraka status, by the condition of the DK itself?
It's a good question, Peter, and not by the condition of the DK itself. I would say by what the periods are showing in general. So if the periods both in Parashara and Gemini are showing potential danger to the health, right, and then the DK is involved, then you have to think along the lines of now it's playing the role of Maraka.
Right.
I wouldn't say that you could do that by just seeing. Now, of course, if that DK is also with malefics, as we saw in the previous chart, then yeah, then it's more of an afflicted DK. So it's just like, the Arishta yogas in the Parashari system, when they contain, say, natural malefics that are also retrograde, they're worse, but when they also contain a primary marker, then they become worse. So it's the same thing in the Jaimini system. When you have the AK afflicted by the GK, and then also malefics, and then there's the DK involved, that's a good that's a combination that would be an Arishta showing potential danger to the health from the Jaimini point of view. So again, related to the MK here, I want to pull up this chart here. This is the chart of someone who is one of the greatest and most successful and most renowned race car drivers, stock cars, a guy by the name of Dale Earnhardt. And so again, who's the natural significator of vehicles? What planet?
Yes, Venus.
What's its condition here?
It's dignity.
As dignity, own sign. And then who's the fourth lord here?
Mars.
Fourth lord of vehicles. What's its condition?
Own sign
And
with the Lagna Lord. Exalted.
And who's the MK?
Jupiter.
Jupiter Swa, right? And so what I'm saying here is that Karaka vehicles, and then even if you see it from the moon, Venus again becomes the fourth lord in the fourth house. So from the birth lagna, from the moon, you see in terms of the Karaka, all of them are in an exceptional condition, as is the MK. And this is the chart of someone who obviously had, you might say, karma with exceptional vehicles, since he was a race car driver and started driving in his early 20s. But one thing that I wanted to note about this is that, what's the problem with this MK here? And what's a negative side of it?
The aspect of the GK Saturn from Virgo.
It's the aspect of the natural malefic Saturn, who happens to be the GK. And what happens, obviously, when you race cars is oftentimes there are crashes. And this is what happened with him that killed him. He had a car crash during a race, last lap of a race, actually, that killed him.
Jupiter's malefic Hemming.
Jupiter has malefic Hemming here. That's some additional problem with it. This happened in Saturn Mars. See the role of Marika here, of course. Saturn's in the primary Marika condition, and then they're 6-8 from each other. So I wanted to, and this is a point. Now this relates to your question, Peter, because the Aries period was one, and this would be predictable, and tell me in what way it would be predictable, that one in which he was actually quite successful in his endeavors, which was racing cars, and in what way would that be predictable? Why would you predict really good success in the Aries major period?
Because it contains the AM and the PK, with an exalted sun being aspected by the DK. Lots of references.
First of all, you've got the AMK there in its own sign, but forming a good Jaimini Raja Yoga. Now, this house gets very benefically hemmed, with both planets on either side having benefics in their dignified. But there's the influence of Rahu, Ketu, and now also the moon is the DK. The Aries period and the sub-period of Virgo was when it killed him, this period and sub-period. You can see again, they're 6-8 from each other. Saturn here is the GK aspecting and afflicting the MK. He died in a car crash. But now you see the DK here aspecting onto these planets in Aries and onto that sign, again playing the role of the Marika. All right. So there's one,
Elucidating that, Mark. Makes
Sorry?
it much clearer.
yeah, sure. So there's one more chart I want to discuss that has nothing to do with the articles, but I want to discuss it with a learning point in mind, or what I consider to be an important learning point in mind. It has to do with a prediction I made that is coming out in a way in which I was even maybe skeptical that what I was predicting was going to come out, but it is. So when I pull up this chart, focus on Venus, because this person has been running the 20-year Venus major period. It's the chart of an Indian woman. She's actually starting to be in her late 30s here, although if you look at her, you would think she was not over the age of 20. She looks, and it's quite lovely. It looks really young for her age. Be hard to guess her age, but you can see that she's been running her Venus major period. So just based on Venus from the birth lagna, what might be something that you could predict about Venus?
Moving abroad.
Sure. So as the fourth lord and the 12th, Georgie recognizes that this is a combination that can give you a foreign settlement, and her and her husband, both of whom are IT professionals, have been living and working in the Netherlands in this period. So that's certainly something that Venus gave. But the reason I want to talk about this Venus is giving some really other result. In fact, being a dominant theme in her life and the one that's closest to her heart, that you would never ever see just from seeing Venus as the 11th and 4th lord and the 12th from the birth lagna. What yoga, and this is what I was seeing when she first consulted with me, this was back years ago, what yoga is Venus involved in here from the moon?
Saraswati Yoga.
Why Saraswati Yoga?
Because from moon, Venus falls 4th, Mercury falls 5th, and Jupiter falls 11th. When natural benefics fall in Kendras and Trikonas or 2 or 11, then Saraswati Yoga gets formed.
That's exactly right. And I also remembered a shloka from that little Sanskrit classic Bhavarta Ratnakara that I've written some commentary on, that indicated that when Venus falls in the 4th from the moon, which of course it would then aspect the 10th from the moon, the person is a musician. So what I learned about this person is that they are a vocalist and are passionate about music. This is their passion in life, and singing is their passion in life. And what they always wanted their career to be was to be being a professional singer, a vocalist. And in particular, she wanted to be someone who sang in musical videos, and also someone who was singing in Bollywood movies. And so when I was seeing Saraswati Yoga from Venus, I was asking her about this, and so this all kind of came out. And then what her big question to me is that, should she really try to go for her dream versus continue on, in her IT career? So I was looking at the periods coming up, and I was seeing Venus, Mercury, right? Which of course would be a period and sub-period that would activate the Saraswati Yoga, but there's other things about Mercury in terms of being a successful performer that was really catching my eye. What would I be referring to here?
Is the 3rd lord?
It's the 3rd lord of performance. Does it have any source of strength there?
Dikbala retrograde.
Is Dikbala, is it forming any combinations that you might be aware of that could give her success as a performer in the Mercury sub-period?
It's with the 2nd lord Sun as a vocalist.
Sun is there as the 2nd lord, but who else is Mercury with significantly?
Then
Mars,
Mars
the 10th lord.
as the 5th lord.
Well, as a
And-
Yogacaraka 10th Lord, remember that 10-3 combination I've highlighted so much in the charts of people who perform professionally, right?
Yes, definitely.
But then, of course, you know, Mars is in its debilitation sign, but what?
Nija Bhanga,
Very Nietzsche Banga. Why?
because Mars is exalted in Capricorn. Saturn is a lot of Capricorn aspects Mars. Mars as a Nietzsche Gra is in the Kendra from Lagna,
And it's in a mutual glance with another debilitated planet.
another debilitated by Jupiter.
Forming what kind of yoga, Mars and Jupiter here?
Mars and Jupiter from 5-9 Trikona Raja Yoga.
Right. And look at Mars's condition in Navamsh.
Yes, very strong.
So, you know, she knew enough Jyotish, or she was technically conversant enough that I was able to sort of explain what I was seeing for her potential-wise in this Mercury. So, you know, I said, you know, it's up to you. I'm not going to try to influence you one way or the other, but, you know, I would say that if you're ever going to be successful as a, you know, performer here, as a vocalist, this would be a period and sub-period when it would happen, right? So later I found out that she made the decision to go to India. Her husband remained in the Netherlands working there. She'd go into India and see if she couldn't get a singing career going there. And what has happened, you know, just like here in the US, apparently there are these TV shows in India where, you know, amateurs compete against each other in talent shows. And if they win, then they're rewarded in certain ways. Well, she's ended up winning a couple of these. And then also, and most recently, one of the results of having won one is that she gets to appear in a professionally produced music video, which the reason this chart was on my mind is that I just heard from her this morning. She sent me a link to that music video, which was very fun to see this happening for her. And so it really is unfolding for her. Now, she's yet to realize her ambition of being hired by a Bollywood director or producer to sing in a Bollywood movie, but apparently there is some conversations going on in this way. So why am I showing you and why am I discussing this? The reason is it just highlights the really importance of seeing yogas, not just from the birth lagna, but from also Chandra lagna. And this comes right out of the classics, where it's, you know, Prashahora, there's a passage I could show you that says directly that all yogas should also be seen from the moon. Because if you don't see this Venus involved in the Saraswati yoga and the Venus-Mercury period activating this, among other things, then really there's no way that you see what is a dominant theme in this person's life and the good potentials of the Venus-Mercury period to make her a successful performer, vocalist. So that's why I wanted to discuss this chart.
Also, Mark, if we look at the Navamsha, we see that there's a lovely exchange between Mercury and Jupiter in there.
Right. So Mercury has that source of strength there as well. So you saw that, right? So this is what I wanted to share with you today, folks. And so unless there's any remaining questions about these two articles or anything that you'd like to bring up, we can conclude with our Sanskrit prayer as usual. I just love teaching this particular webinar because I get to see all you very advanced students and have these very advanced discussions about charts. You seeing things sometimes that I miss. So that's great.
Mark, one question can I ask?
Yes.
So when you look at the chart, you look from Sun Lagna and the Moon Lagna, or the Udaya Lagna. But is it true that if the moon is strong and the Lagna is not that strong, then you should look at the chart from the Moon Lagna? If the Sun is strong, then you look at the chart from the Sun Lagna. If Udaya Lagna is strong, then you look at the chart from Udaya Lagna?
Well, I've been asked this before, Neelima, and my response to this is that I never make it an either or. Now, if there's a particular strong Chandra Lagna, all right, I do pay attention to that. But in my experience, to use the Vimshotri Dasha in the most sophisticated way in which it was intended to use it, you have to see what potentials a particular period and even a sub-period give from three perspectives minimum: from the birth Lagna, from the moon, and from Chandra Lagna, right? And of course, that starts to get very complex and your brain starts to short circuit because there's so many. But I just take them one at a time. And, I ask myself the question, okay, what does it show from this perspective? And of course, I'm wanting to see confluence. If the indications are similar from, say 1 or 2 perspectives or all 3, that's really something to make note of. But in my experience, all 3 of them, they'll give their result, right? And the chapter, if you see the chapter on interpretation of dashas, periods and subperiods, it really talks about, more than anything, about where the subperiod lord falls from the major period lord, right? So in other words, that's dasha lagna. And to miss that significance, both in the birth chart and divisional charts, I wrote an article called The Kaleidoscope of Time, which was all about the importance of dasha lagna. You'll see how just, again, you would miss things in the significance of some period. So this is the best way I can answer that question. However, although if there's a strong Chandra Lagna, moon in its, exaltation sign or its own sign, I may pay particular attention. But it's not an either or, right? It's both in my experience. Good question. Anything else?
Thank you very much.
Sure. So we'll conclude with our Sanskrit prayer. Ahom Masatoma Sadgamaya Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya Murityarma Amritam Gamaya Sarvesham Swasti Bhavatu Sarvesham Shanti Bhavatu Sarvesham Purnam Bhavatu Sarvesham Mangalam Bhavatu Loka Samasta Sukino Bhavantu Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Tat Sat.